Hey everyone, welcome to this week's conversation with Dr. Stephen Nedd about the body and how to fix, protect, or maintain it using outside-the-box alternative solutions. If you're a big fan of the pharmaceutical or surgical approach, you are so in the wrong place, because on this podcast, we're not going to be pushing the conventional medicine methods or way of thinking about health. If you're looking for another way to live longer and healthier, join me, Ron Nedd, and my brother Dr. Stephen Nedd for this week's body chat about organic gardening with special guest Jai McFall. Me? I'm a retired Twin Cities chiropractor currently helping people buy and sell homes in the Tampa Bay and Los Angeles areas. My brother has a thriving chiropractic practice in the Clearwater area of Tampa Bay, Florida. In this podcast, we're going to chat about all sorts of topics related to health, nutrition, exercise, just about everything having to do with the body. You're invited to listen into our body chat, but don't forget that neither of us is giving you health advice, so don't rush off to do something without either checking with your doctor first or seeing Dr. Stephen Nedd as a patient at his office. Good afternoon, Steve.
Good afternoon, Ron.
So today we have a special guest, and I'd like to give you a moment to introduce that guest before we start diving into organic gardening.
Yes, I'd be honored to. So our special guest today is Jai McFall. She's a master gardener and organic garden educator, and she's been an organic gardener for over 50 years and an organic landscape designer for over 30 years. And that includes her specialty in planting and growing edible landscapes. So Jai is like us. She's from the Midwest. She's from Michigan, and she's been here in Clearwater since 2005. She just recently helped me create my incredible home organic garden, along with planting in the front and backyards, various organic trees and bushes. And she also turned me on to an irrigation system from a local scientist, Winston Cow, which I'm just using not only for my drinking water and inside the house, but also as purified water with my sprinkler system. Because if you're going to go organic, it doesn't make sense to use city water that has toxins like fluoride, chlorine, chloramines, and that pretty much basically defeats the purpose.
Right.
So anyway, I'm very excited to present to you Jai McFall. Here she is.
Okay. Welcome, Jai. It's nice to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
And I'm looking forward to getting all the information you're going to share with all of us. So why don't we start off with something really simple and go into what an accepted definition for organic gardening is?
Well, basically, that is gardens that are grown without herbicides or pesticides, no GMOs, and they don't specifically say that you have to remineralize the soil, which is really important, and I'm going to tell you why in just a minute.
Okay. Good. So herbicides would be things that kill weeds, and pesticides are things that kill bugs, right?
Yeah, bugs and various other living creatures. The bad thing about it is when they add the pesticides, it'll kill the worms as well, and we want worms in our soil.
Okay. So that explains that to some extent. And so then what are the key differences between organic and conventional gardening procedures?
Well, an organic gardener, and it's funny because I've talked to many, many gardeners over the years, and sometimes they think it's okay to use Roundup. And it's not, because that's the worst herbicide that there is.
Absolutely.
Most of the time, the organic gardeners build up soil with manure and composting and various things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't use herbicides and pesticides. Now, what I do that's unique and very much needed is adding the minerals. We actually need to have 90 minerals in the soil in order to have healthy plants. And then our bodies need 90 minerals for us to be healthy, so that we need them in the plants, because we get our minerals mostly from plants, can be from a water too. But it's really important to do your proper soil preparation, because if you don't prepare your soil properly, it's not going to have the minerals, the microorganisms, and there's lots of other creatures that should be alive in the soil to actually make communication systems between the plants and their immune system and all that kind of stuff.
It's really interesting because a good friend of mine out here is reading a book by a doctor. I'm not going to even try to pronounce his name, but the book's called How to Live 150 Years in Health. And she was telling me today that she's reading a section in there where he's talking about minerals in the soil. And she was giving that same number, 90 something number, but that even the good organic soil used to be 90 something minerals, and now it's like 14. And the things that you get in the grocery store have 3.
Yes. Well, one of the things most people are not aware of is that the soil does not have minerals, and it hasn't. And in 1936, the government actually tested the soil across the United States, and they released a document that said the soil is depleted of minerals, and the food that is growing in it is starving us no matter how much we eat, and it can't be remedied until the soil is brought back into proper mineral balance.
That's correct. And it's only gotten worse since then.
Much worse, yes.
All right. So then what are the key differences found in the food that's grown through organic gardening as compared to the food grown through conventional gardening?
Well, I don't know about you, but one day I was at a party and I assumed the food was organic, and I picked up a celery and I took a bite of it and I spit it out. I could taste the chemicals in the celery.
Mm-hmm.
So you can tell by the flavor if there's chemicals in it. And because minerals are not only essential for life, but they're what gives food its flavor. When you taste really nutrient-dense food, it tastes phenomenal. So when you come out here to taste Stephen's food, you're just going to be blown away because he's putting all the minerals into the soil the way I taught him to.
Oh, that's great. All right. So that's the big difference, is that they don't have the chemicals in organic food that's done properly, and it'll have the more mineral dense type nutrients in it.
Exactly.
Okay, good. Now, what is GMO, and why is there a bunch of hubbub going around about that? Just to clarify for the people who are listening.
All right. Well, anybody who does not know what GMOs are, they really should go on the internet and look up animal GMO studies, because they will be shocked. But genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, are actually created in a laboratory. So a scientist is actually taking pieces of different kinds of critters and combining them. Like, for instance, if I wanted to make a sweet tomato, a sweeter tomato, one that would live longer, I could take a gene of the tomato that I wanted to use, and then let's see, what would be sweet? A delicious apple. So I could take some gene from the apple, put that into the tomato, and I want it to be able to live through the cold weather better. So let's see, what would live in the cold? Oh, a halibut from Alaska. So I could take a gene from the halibut, put that in there, but also I want to be able to spray Roundup on the soil, and I don't want it to die. So I inject some of the Roundup into the gene as well. Mm-hmm. Then I start growing that, and I sell it to people as food. Mm-hmm. It's not native to this planet. Mm-hmm. Our bodies don't know what to do with it. They try to digest it. More acid, break it down. It won't, because it can't be absorbed by the body. And it causes all kinds of problems. So because it can't digest and the body's making more acid, you get acid reflux. It'll actually start killing the good bacteria in the gut because it's got Roundup in it as well. Mm-hmm. So it destroys your immune system, and all the bad bacteria start coming in, like Candida. Mm-hmm. And it usually results in cancer. It's a big problem.
Yeah, it is. And unfortunately, there's a lot of money made by the companies that do that.
Companies.
Yeah, and we won't mention any name like Monsanto on this podcast. But they're behind a lot of things. Like in California, last year they were trying to pass a law just to have it labeled so people can know whether it's GMO or not. And boy, you would think that you were burning dogs in the street or something because of all the noise that was over that and how it's ridiculous. And it was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. It's like, yeah, just put on whether it is or isn't. The cost factor, they made a big deal out of it. It's like, yeah, 3 letters. 3 letters don't cost that much money. Anyway, moving on to the next thing. If somebody wants to have their own organic garden, what are the first planning steps that they need to do?
Well, that's going to depend on where they are, because here in Florida, we don't have any soil. We have sand. I'm originally from Michigan. We had soil.
Right.
So soil preparation, no matter where you live, is still the most important thing, because we still need to add the minerals and the microorganisms. Down here in Florida, full sun usually will kill a lot of things, whereas up in the north, we want more sun. So you have to decide what you're going to grow and what type of light it needs and that kind of stuff.
All right. So you have to know what it is that you want to end up with before you can figure out how to get there.
Yes.
Okay, good. And so then once you know that, then the planning can begin. And what are the most common items that people need for proper organic garden?
Well, you have to have some decent soil.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I was in Michigan, I would go and pick up compost from the big composting center in Ann Arbor and take it to every job that I did. And I would throw away some of the, even if it was black soil, I would throw some of it away and put in this new compost, as well as the minerals and the microorganisms. That way we create a living community, living soil, so that the plants can actually grow and be healthy. And then, of course, you want to make sure you have enough room to grow everything. Because I've seen people, they'll buy all these little teeny plants and they plant them 3 inches apart and they're all going to get a foot wide. It just doesn't work. So pay attention to how big they're going to get and give them room to grow.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned a couple times as far as putting the minerals and microorganisms in. Would this be a good time to go over how that's done?
Sure.
Okay.
So you mix good soil in with compost so you have a nice black soil, because soil is what holds moisture and nutrients. Mm-hmm. Sand does not. So that's why sand is not good for that. What I normally do is I dig a hole to put the plant in, and I put the minerals right underneath. Now, the minerals that I sell are mined from an ancient seabed in Nevada, so it's God-made, not man-made. It's balanced, and it's chelated, which means it's already been through living organisms, so that means it's bioavailable. And that means plants can take it up and utilize it immediately. So I put that underneath the roots. I call my products garden magic, because people used to come to my gardens and they would look at them and go, my goodness, you can't grow gardens like this in Florida. What do you do? Mm-hmm. And so I call it garden magic, because they said it was like magic. Mm-hmm. And so garden magic number 1 are the minerals. That's the plant food. Garden magic number 3, it's a bat guano. Do you know what guano is? Mm-hmm. Okay. Those who don't know, it's poop. Mm-hmm. It's a bat poop and blood meal and a secret ingredient. I don't just mix it in with the soil because I want the plants to be able to have it. Mm-hmm. So I put it underneath and on top, so that when you water it from the top, it goes into the top roots, and then the bottom roots grow right into them. And they just love it. It's just so good for them. And so then once the whole bed is planted, water well, and then we take garden magic number 2, which are the microorganisms. Mm-hmm. And if you remember, I said minerals are elements essential for life. So the microorganisms can't live in the soil without minerals either.
Right.
So we want to put those in after we water, because the water allows them to spread through the soil and make colonies so that they can help the plants absorb and use the nutrients.
Excellent. And then what about seeds? Do you do seeds? Do you grow from seeds, or do you grow from already grown small plants?
I do both. And here's why. A lot of times people don't know how to plant seeds. I remember one day in my garden center, this older lady came in and she goes, Jay, all those seeds I bought from you, none of them grew. And I said, wow, that must have been frustrating. She goes, yeah. I says, well, what seeds did you try to grow? And she says, onions. And I said, how deep did you plant them? 1 inch. Well, here's the rule for seeds. You plant the seed 2 times deeper than it is big. So and onions are like the size of pepper. Not peppercorns, but ground up pepper.
Mm-hmm.
So you can only put 2 times as much dirt as that is big on top of it. So if you plant them too deep, they'll never grow.
So you're saying 2 times the size of the seed, not the size of what it's going to grow.
Right.
Interesting. Okay, good. So you can do both ways with seeds and with, what do you call the small plants that are little baby versions?
Little seedlings. But the other thing with seeds is if you plant them and you water them and they start growing, they send out a little teeny root underneath and they send up a little teeny bit going up, and you don't see anything yet. Now, if you forget to water it once, it'll dry out and die. So people do have problems with planting seeds because they either plant them too deep, or they water them too much and drown them, or they don't water them enough and they die.
So those are the keys, is planting them at the right depth and watering them correctly.
Yeah.
All right. And then seedlings, is there any advantage to those over the seeds other than you probably don't have as much of a risk like you do with the seeds?
Well, they're a lot more fun because they're there.
Mm-hmm.
You put them in and you water them and you walk away and you go, oh, look, I got plants.
Right.
Where some seeds can germinate in 3 days and some take a week. So having little seedlings is just more satisfactory and easier to grow.
I would think so. And then what about as far as proper water? Stephen got his irrigation system done. He's getting proper water. Is that something that's a requirement? Can people use regular water? Say that they have a smaller garden, can they use it from their filtration system inside their house and take it out? What's your recommendation, especially in Florida where there's lots of rain?
Yeah, well, that's real interesting down here because there's a lot of pollution to the underwater, the understory water. So people that have wells, they have to test it first to see if it's any good. And then they promote this reclaimed water, which is sewage that's not totally cleaned.
Right.
And they say, no, make sure you don't eat anything that it touches and don't let your children and your dogs walk in it.
Right.
And then they try to tell you it's okay to put it on your food.
Yeah, I think that it's supposed to be more okay for somebody's lawn or flowers or something like that.
Right. That would be the only thing I would use it for. But still, if you're putting it in your lawn and your dogs and cats and kids walk on it, it's not good.
True.
But so then there's city water, which has chlorine, chloramines, fluorides. But sometimes people don't have any other choices because if it doesn't rain, we got to water.
Mm-hmm.
So ideally, we get a good filtration system and we put good water on it like Stephen did.
Okay. And in Florida, it's different than in California, where rain is something that happens maybe 3 days out of the year. So in Florida, a lot of the watering is done by Mother Nature.
Yes.
Especially during the summer months.
Yep.
And then as far as sunlight, I know when I was last over at Stephen's house, I was looking at the backyard and we have trees here and this here and trying to figure out how that works. Is it something where you're doing an organic garden that has to have sunlight all day, or is there a certain number of hours that it would need to have, or does that depend on the plants also?
It depends on the plants, but a lot of times people say, but I need full sun.
Mm-hmm.
The package may say it needs full sun, but this sun down here in Florida is brutal. I mean, it'll burn your skin in just a matter of half an hour or so.
Mm-hmm.
So what's it going to do to those poor little baby plants? So most plants do not want full sun.
All right. So then having partial sun or sun for a short time during the day is the best way to do it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And some plants, the ones that like more shade, I make sure that they get morning sun and not afternoon sun, because afternoon sun is very brutal. And the ones that want more sun, I make sure they get the afternoon sun.
So this is part of the planning that you do with your clients as far as what's going to get planted where in their yard.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. And now what about tools? What type of tools are there that people are going to need for doing organic gardening in their own yard?
Well, you need a decent spade or a shovel. There's a lot of trees down here, so you probably want a mattock, which kind of looks like a hoe with a pickaxe on it. And you can use that to dig and break through some of the roots. Or you might just want some big loppers which is like a big scissors for the plants. And you always want to have some hand pruners for trimming because you can get into the dirt easily with those as well.
Okay. Anything else as far as what people would need, the most common items that people need for doing the organic gardening?
Well, you always need wheelbarrows because you're going to be moving things around, dirt and compost and bags of things, as well as a pitchfork so that you can go get some mulch and put around your plants. Trowels, those are like little hand shovels. So
exactly. All right. So those are the basic things. Somebody could go to a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a nursery, and they could probably get all the things they need.
Yeah.
Other than maybe the soil, where does somebody get the soil that they need? You talked about getting good soil and getting it mixed in with manure. Where does somebody get something like that?
Well, here in Florida, I found a guy who actually takes topsoil and mixes it with local composted horse manure, and that's the best that I've found here, so that's what I use. But you have to pretty much get 3 yards or more at a time. So if somebody only wanted a couple of bags of soil, most of the time I have some loose at my place and we can fill up bags and they can take them home. But if not, I recommend they go to Lowe's, Home Depot, and they get their pure topsoil because all the other ones have chemicals in them. And topsoil has no chemicals in it whatsoever. And it's pretty inexpensive. So that's what I recommend.
It's just called topsoil?
Yep. It's pretty cheap.
Well, that's always good. All right. So now, is there a timing factor involved in what people choose to grow? We've got that there's the sun aspect of things and where you locate the plants and so on. But do you have to also take into consideration what time of year that you're going to be planting certain things?
Oh, definitely. Down here in Florida, we plant our winter crops, which would be summer crops in the north. We start planting those in November and December. And that's like broccolis and cauliflowers and lettuces and arugulas and celery and all those kind of things. Because once it gets hot, they die. But in the north, it's the opposite. We start planting, April, May for the summer crops. And then we can actually plant sometimes March and April for some of the cooler weather crops like the broccolis and the cauliflowers. And then again, in the fall, we can do some of the cold weather crops.
All right. So it's important to know which ones to plant when. Now, if somebody were buying seeds for different things, would it give that information on the packets?
Well, all the seed packets are basically written for the north. So you can't follow them down here because people do that all the time. They go, the package says that I can plant this in April. I go, well, that's for the north. That's not for the south.
That's very good to know.
Yeah.
All right. So that's for the more Midwest type climates in the Northeast. Okay. And then how do you keep squirrels and other critters from eating the results of all the hard work that you do?
Well, that's a really good question. That's what Stephen asked me. And so what he did is I told him how to build a bed with the boards going up into the air and actually built like a cage over his raised bed with bird netting on it. And that keeps the critters out.
Even the squirrels?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Squirrels and rabbits, and I don't think you have deer as much down there, but...
Well, there are deer down here, but rabbits don't get into beds when they're raised beds because they're 2 feet tall. So that's one way to keep the rabbits out. The squirrels, bird netting, and deer, a really good way for anybody to keep deer out is put some sticks in the ground and run fish line between them. And they won't be able to see it. But when they walk into it, they feel it and they go, what is that? I don't see anything. And they try to go through a few times and they keep hitting this thing and they go away.
Okay.
So that's a really easy way because it's not dangerous to anybody. You can do 2 or 3 across and it pretty much keeps the deer out.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, are you able to help someone who wants to start organic gardening?
Oh, yeah.
Now, what can you do for them that they can't just learn on the internet? Because there's so much stuff on the internet now, and there's probably a lot of things that are helpful for you that you can show people that way. But what type of things do you do that aren't covered by those types of training videos?
Well, one of the things that I do for my customers is I tell them, call me with any questions. Because if you're in the middle of gardening and you go, oh my God, what do I do now? You just call me. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing this long enough that I don't get stumped. I go, okay, well, now do this, now do that. Or
that's great. Now, I have a question that wasn't part of what we were originally planning on going over, but is there a way of testing the soil as far as minerals? Because you put the minerals, you put the microorganisms in, and I would guess that you can't just use that soil over and over and over and over again forever, that at some point you have to replenish the minerals and the microorganisms. But is there a way of knowing when that you would do that?
Well, I've got two answers to that. One is there's only one company in the United States that I would trust to test your soil, because the rest of them don't look for more minerals than 3, because that's what the standard uses.
Right.
And so you take your sample to your soil over to the Cooperative Extension Service and they test it. And all they're going to do is tell you nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, pretty much. And so because we need 90 minerals, they're not going to test for that because it's too expensive and they don't even think it's relevant.
Right.
So my answer is, yes, you can keep using the same soil, but every time you plant, add the minerals, and every year add more microorganisms.
So now if you've got a bed like Stephen has in the back of his yard that's raised, he would have originally, before he put the soil in the bed, he would have put the minerals below the soil at the bottom, right?
No.
Okay. How does he do that then?
Okay, so if he did what you just said, it rains, it would wash it out.
Right, it would go down into the sandy soil below.
Right, so he just wasted all the minerals. Okay. So what he did is we got the soil in the bed, and we did add one more product that I hadn't mentioned. It's called biochar. And biochar was developed by the Mayan Indians 6,000 years ago, and it's what allowed them to grow enough food to feed their huge culture. So you add that on, and it holds 5 times as much moisture as regular soil. It holds onto the minerals, but releases it when the plants need it. It's the perfect living place for the microorganisms. We know that charcoal purifies, so it'll purify the soil and the water going through it. But the most important thing that it does is it fixes carbon in the soil. And farmers never have enough carbon in the soil because carbon is to plants what oxygen is to us.
Okay.
So we put that on top, and then we put a little bit more dirt on top. And then when he digs the hole to plant the plant, he puts the minerals in the bottom of the hole along with some of the bat guano mixture, puts the plant roots right on top of that, puts more dirt around it, and then puts the same amount of minerals and bat guano on top. Again, so when he waters it from the top, it goes into the top roots, and those bottom roots grow right into it. It's like having a wonderful meal constantly.
Right. So then when he harvests those plants and he's going to put new plants in, at that point he would put more minerals at the base of whatever plant he's putting in, and at the top, like you just described, with the bat guano.
Yep.
Okay.
And also, if a lot of the plants that Stephen planted are perennials, which means they live for more than a couple of years. And so those he's going to feed with the two, the minerals and the bat guano. He's going to feed them every 3 months.
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, that was just a question that I had, which was great information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, if somebody wants to contact you to get help in starting their garden or fixing their garden, because I know my good friend Laura Betterly, who I helped her get her house earlier this year, she did this great video that she put on Facebook, walking around and showing all the stuff that you did with her. And Laura never does anything halfway. She had an awesome job in the back. But if somebody wants to get help in doing that on a smaller scale or a larger scale, how would they contact you?
Well, they could either call me at 727-433-1661, or they could email me at jaibird, BIRD, 19@yahoo.com.
Okay, good. And I'll put that information in the podcast notes for people. And so is there anything else that you'd like to say before we end?
I do have a lot of videos on my website, so they could feel free to go there and get more information.
Well, give me that website address, and I'll put that in the podcast notes too.
Organic Living for All, FORALL.com.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jay. It was good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Ron.
And I appreciate all this information. It's very valuable. We'll have to get a lot of people to listen to it. I know that Stephen will talk to a lot of his patients about it, and I'll be telling people out here to make sure they listen to it too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us this week on the Body Chat podcast. We both really appreciate your time and your attention. We want to provide you with interesting and informative episodes each week, and if you have a topic you'd like us to cover or any questions you'd like us to answer, send an email to us at info@bodychatpodcast.com. That's info@bodychatpodcast.com. To make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Body Chat Podcast now on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify. See you next week.